Joining us now, David Corn, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones Magazine. David Corn, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you, Rachel.
Do you see similarities with the tactics of the McCain campaign and past Bush campaigns?
Yeah, and it's not surprising at all. John McCain, who once was the victim of George W. Bush and Karl Rove's playbook back in 2000 during the primaries, has embraced this sort of Bush-Rove establishment, bringing these people onto his campaign and to run a campaign that really could fit almost any generic Republican. I think it's out of sync with the image that John McCain had cultivated for years in Washington as somewhat of a straight shooter fellow who didn't like the usual spin tactics of politics. I was on that conference call the other day about when Steve Schmidt went ape over the New York Times, and it was about a story the Times written about Rick Davis, and not once in his whole complaint did he point out any factual errors in the story itself. I mean, this is even goes back before Bush-Rove days. The Republicans have run against the elite liberal media, what they think it is, for decades now. Remember Jesse Helms campaigning against CBS. And so John McCain used to joke that the media were his base. Reporters loved him in town, and of course, shortly after that conference call, you had Barack Obama's campaign sending out copies of emails that the McCain campaign had sent out over the past few weeks, in which they cite the New York Times as an authoritative source when it served the interests of the McCain campaign. So it's really it's a pretty phony tactic on their part, but one that's always good for getting that Republican base whipped up. And the other thing it's good for, Rachel, is that if you think the New York Times or any other big media institution has a story that may come out that may inconvenience your candidate between now and the election, well, you're setting up a context, Steve Schmidt is, to saying, see, we told you so. There's no reason you should pay attention to that investigative report about the lobbyists in our campaign, because they're against us.
And that's convenient, very convenient for the McCain campaign to press back against the New York Times publishing the latest story on Rick Davis when it was simultaneously reported in Newsweek magazine and also in Roll Call magazine in Washington, D.C.
Right.
But they just went against the New York Times in order to try to keep up the ideological spin there. But, on the issue of the media, it's not just attacking the media overtly. There's also this issue of pretending that real journalism doesn't exist and that you can fake letters to the editor and you can have fake journalists like this guy Jeff Gannon from the right-wing website pretend like he's part of the White House press corps. You can have media days where the only people who are invited are people from far-right talk radio. This idea that the press doesn't really exist and the media is whatever the campaign or the White House says is the media. I wonder if having suffered through that under the Bush administration, if it's a case of fool me once, shame on me, if the media won't let him get away with it again.
Well, you see in the last couple of weeks here, the media really reacting strongly to the McCain campaign on a number of fronts. When they had that sort of blitzkrieg of negative ads on Barack Obama, every mainstream media fact-checking organization came out again and again and said these ads are so far over the top that they're not credible. Even Karl Rove said so on Fox News. And at the same time, you have the media rebelling against the McCain's campaign's efforts to keep Sarah Palin away from anybody who might ask her a question. Now, do voters care about this? I don't know. Maybe there's a drip, drip, drip here effect that will break through at some point, and people will say, listen, Sarah Palin, if she can't take questions, how can she go up against the Russians, even if she can see them from her front yard? And I think John McCain, it goes back to, listen, I've been a reporter in town here many years, and John McCain, I was like many other sort of liberal reporters, he was my favorite Republican, and I know the old John McCain would look at this tactic of faking letters to the editor, and he would have just said, that is just ridiculous. He would have railed about it in books. He would have thought it was absurd occurred, and if it was happening on his watch, he would have ordered an end to it. But that's not the John McCain who is running for president, not when he's, under the control or spell of or using that Bush-Rove Washington establishment.
If anybody can find the 2000-era John McCain, he would make the best cable news pundit ever right now for this season. Yes. David Corn from the Washington Bureau Chief of Mother Jones Magazine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel.